Hi everyone, welcome back to Brookdale Farm. Well, it's time to start getting our PTO unit on our tractor back together. We've cleaned up most of the parts up the back here. We've made up some new gaskets for it. We've cleaned up the main unit. We've got new bearings and seals and stuff up here for it. So we're all ready to start reassembling it. Now the first thing we're going to put back in is this shaft here. This is the shaft that holds all the clutch plates with this gear. Now before we do that, there is a seal in here that we need to replace. All of these seals are a little bit hard to get now. I managed to get a genuine Chamberlain one for this actually. Tractor and industrial machinery in Bayswater have the parts, genuine parts for these, and so do Wagga tractors in Wagga, New South Wales. Now Wagga tractors have all their parts on eBay. It's a little bit hard to find some of them sometimes, but if you email them or ring them, they can send you a link so that you can find the parts. So either of these places are really good places to get Chamberlain bits from. I'll put a link in the description to both of these so that anybody who's doing these can go and find the parts for themselves. So this seal here is a double-lipped seal. It's a little bit different to a lot of seals. Because there's oil on both sides. So there's gear oil on the inside here from the diff, and there's the clutch oil on this side, and we want to keep them separate. So this is basically like two oil seals in here. And it is marked on the front to face, so that's the way round that it goes. Just in case any of you are trying to get these seals, the part number on this is 46882. This is probably no longer available other than if you go to Tractor and Industrial Machinery because it's genuine. So we're going to just drop that in there. We're going to put a piece of wood over and we're just going to tap that down into place. Okay, so next we want to refit this shaft and this gear back into the housing here. So we're going to start by this is the seal face here, and we're just going to put, if I can get it to stand up one-handed, we're just going to put a little bit of oil on here. And we'll put a little bit of oil around the seal as well. This just helps everything slide in. Okay, so when it comes to putting this gear back in, there's a part number on here with a slightly more raised ridge on this side. That needs to go in towards what is the back of your tractor when this is all back together. And that slots into here. There's a key that goes in here as well, and it can be just a little bit tricky trying to get everything lined up as you're pushing it all back together. So that fits in there, and you've got to get the shaft just coming through and then put the key in, and then try and get it all the way through without the key falling out again. Okay, once we've got the shaft all the way in, there's a big circlip that goes on the outside here. So we just need to open that up and slot that into place. Next, we want to fit the 2 cones for the bearings for the main PTO shaft. I often like to use the old cone that we knocked out to help knock the new cone into place. Next, we can put in the new seal in here. This is just a standard seal rather than a double-lipped seal. So with these, the spring always goes towards the oil. Okay, the next thing that we want to put in is the PTO shaft. It goes in through here, but there's a little bit of work we need to do to this first. So this is the sealing face on here, and it's got a bit of a ridge in there where the seal has been wearing into that face. So we're going to put a Speedy sleeve on, which is a very, very thin piece of metal that that you hammer on over here. You put a little bit of Loctite on here, a little bit of Loctite on the inside of the sleeve, and hammer it on down. And that gives you a new sealing surface. They give you this cup to hammer it on with. So the cup fits over the seal, and there's a bit of a ridge round here that you take off later. But, you know, the shafts are usually too long for these cups. So we're going to modify that a little bit. So yeah, I'm going to put a bit of Loctite on here, tap this down into place, and then once you've done that, there's a little line around the very base here that allows you to peel this lip off, and that gives you a new surface for your seal to run on. Okay, so we've got our shaft in the vise, we've got our Speedy sleeve here, we've got our cup for tapping it on here. And we're just going to, we've put some Loctite on it already, and we're just going to tap it down. So we've fitted our Speedy sleeve to our shaft, and we've trimmed it up so it's the right size. Next we want to put the 2 bearings onto the shaft. Now the 2 bearings on here are cone bearings, but they are both very slightly different sized bearings. So the bottom bearing is slightly bigger than the top bearing so that it will fit down over the first bit of the shaft, and you only need to tap it on to the bottom section of the shaft. The top bearing is that much smaller so that it is a tight fit on that first piece of shaft there. I'm not quite sure what happened to the sound on this bit of the video, but it didn't work. But anyway, I usually like to use part of the old bearing as a drift to tap the new bearing into place. Then I've got a big block of steel sitting on top of that with a hole in the middle that I'm just using to tap the bearing down. Okay, next we're just going to wipe all the dirt off the end of that first. Put a little bit of oil on the bearing just to make sure it's got some lubrication, and a bit around our seal area here. And we'll put a little bit on the seal in here too, and the bearing race, just to make sure everything slides together nicely. We slide this in here. Now as this is going in, we've got to get our gear onto the, we've got to get our other bearing onto the back first. A little bit of oil around it. Now back bearing goes over the shaft here, and it should be a tight fit, but not too tight a fit. Just going to have to give that a little tap to get it started. Once again, we're using the old bearing as a drift to tap the new bearing on here. Okay, so next we want to put this gear on, and it slides in. You can't have much of this shaft coming through the bearing when you want to put this on. Make sure you get it on the same way round it was when you took it off. It may well be the same, but I'm not confident about that. But it needs to be the right way round to mesh with and line up with everything on this shaft here. Okay, that feels really good now. It rolls nicely, and we've got no sideways movement in that shaft anywhere. Now we've got locking tabs and a second nut to go on the back here. Don't forget to come back and put them on later. I'm going to leave them off for the moment, just in case I need to come and adjust that up anymore as we put everything else together, whether everything pulls together a bit more. But I'll put that on when we've finished assembling everything else. Okay, next we're going to be rebuilding the clutch on our PTO unit here. Now this is our new clutch pack that we've got here, and they come already stacked like this. It's a good idea to keep them carefully stacked in the same order. Don't turn anything around. I believe that some of these discs have a very slight convex concave dish to them, and this just helps when you take the PTO out of gear. It just helps spread the plates a little bit and stops them dragging so much. So if you put them back together the wrong way round, it won't necessarily disengage properly. Now before we start putting the clutch plates in, we've got a seal in here that we've got to replace. Now the original seal is once again one of these double lip seals because it's got oil on both sides of it. I couldn't get this exact seal, so instead we've got two seals that are half the thickness, and we're going to put these in face to face. So we'll put the first one in with the oil side. The oil side always goes on the side with the spring. So this will seal the diff oil from coming into our PTO unit. Then this one, the other way round, will stop the oil in here running back into the diff. They're two different types of oil. If you use diff oil in your clutch, it will drag and won't come out of gear properly, as most of them don't. So we're going to start by installing these. They just drop in there, and then we'll just tap them in with a socket over them to make sure they seat nicely. Now to start putting our clutch plates in, we're going to drop one of the steel ones in first. Then we're going to put this centre piece in next. Now this piece here has a step machined into the splines in the top. The step goes in to the top of the clutch. And then we put bronze one on, a steel, a bronze, a steel, and we just keep stacking it up like that. Then sitting on top we have the big heavy clutch plate, and on top of that we can put our clutch retaining disc, whatever you want to call that, and fasten that back down with all the bolts and spring washers. We've just nipped these bolts up. We need to come back and tighten them up later. Next we're going to put the locking tab and the other nut on the back end of this shaft. And then we're gonna leave this bit as it is at the moment, just because we need to do some adjustments on it once it's on the tractor. So we're not going to put the cover and everything back on just yet. Okay, so just give it one final check that we're all happy with that. Then the locking tag goes on, and this other nut. Now this is an odd shaped nut, and they were with the two sort of more chamfered faces facing towards each other. So we're ready to start reassembling this, put this back on the tractor now. We've got a new gasket. We're just going to put a bit of aviation gasket goo around here to help it seal up and to help hold the gasket in place while we're assembling it. Okay, before we lift the PTO unit back into place, we're just going to put a bit of oil on here and on here. Back here is where the seal sits, so we want that to slide through nice and smoothly, and up here there's a little tiny pilot bearing that this goes into. Okay, so we've got all of this cover back on now, and this all turns freely. So this bit's joined together by the gears in the back, and it's freewheeling on the clutch, which is currently disengaged. So that's a really good sign. So the next little repair we've got to do is on this rear cover here. Now this is the shaft to engage and disengage the PTO. And if we get our hand in here and turn it right up and push it right off to one side, there's an O-ring in here. Now there's an O-ring on either side here, and they're pretty, this is the one from the other side, they're pretty hard and worn out. So we've got one out of our kit, which I think is just slightly too small diameter, but it's still going to be better than these ones. We can get some better ones later, but for the moment we're going to put two new O-rings in here. Okay, so to reassemble this end of the clutch, the first thing we want to do is put the three actuators in here. And they're sticking out a lot further than with the old clutch plates. The old clutch plates had worn so that even without any spring pressure on, they were basically right down as far as they would go. Next thing, we want to slide this thing on, and there's a little keyway there. Now we want everything folded in as far as it will go. These springs need to be sort of out, pointing to the outside. So it's a little bit tricky to get them all in the right spot while you hold on to everything and push everything into place. Then there's this funny little nut here that we've got to work in underneath the sets of claws. And it's a little bit tricky in here because everything catches on everything else, but now we just want to try and start screwing that nut on. Okay, so this is the part, one of the parts that actuates the clutch. When you pull the lever, it pushes this forward, which move these pins out here, and that's what puts your clutch into gear. Now, we're still nowhere near tight enough, so we're going to pull this back out and wind this nut in a little bit further. Okay, now when we push that in, that actually locks the clutch up together. When we pull it out, this can freewheel, push it back in, and it locks it up again. Now it's a little bit awkward to get this together. We've got these two little feet in here that slide on here, and then we've got this cone that rides on the feet. You've got to slide it all on together. It's very hard to do one-handed. Now once that's on, you can just get your hand in here to guide the cone onto the shaft without everything falling apart. Now the manual says that you want about 40 pounds or 25 kilos roughly force on that lever to put the PTO into gear. So we're lucky on this one that we have this hatch cut in the top that we can adjust that nut down in there. Let me see if I can get some light on it. So you can see the adjustment nut down in there. If you don't have the fancy inspection hatch cut in yours, what you need to do is do it up a bit, put it together, try it out, take it apart, make your adjustment. Now the later ones you could actually get in through the oil bung to make your adjustment. The other thing you want to make sure is when it's fully adjusted that you can still turn the PTO and that you haven't locked up your clutch too hard in there. Once you're happy with the adjustments, you've got to take the whole thing apart again. And then there's this little lock tab in here to stop this nut undoing while you're working. Then we're just going to put a bit of gasket glue on the gasket again, and we're ready to bolt this cover on for the final time. The last thing we need to do, I've put the oil drain bungs back in the bottom. So we need to fill everything up with oil. Now the PTO unit here has a level bung here, and it says on the back, oil level, just in case you don't know. There's a lot of different things said about which oils you should use in here. We're using an SEA 30. Basically you're looking for a light, reasonably thin, low foaming oil for here. Don't put gearbox oil in, it's way too heavy and your clutch will drag. You can use a hydraulic 68, you can use sort of regular petrol engine oil. We're using something just that little bit thinner. And it doesn't take a lot of oil. So this took 1 litre of oil. It doesn't need much, and we can still turn our PTO shaft. It's dragging a little bit more now there's oil in. We'll put the bung in, and I'll do that up in a second. Now we need to refill the rear differential as well. So there's a filler bung on the top here. And this takes about almost 18 litres of 80W90 gear oil. Now, I suspect that some of them had a level plug here because there's an oil level mark with an arrow up to here. Mine doesn't have that. What it does have is this breather here. When you unscrew that, that is actually a dipstick in there. So fill it up, there's marks on there. I'll throw some oil in there now and we'll go and test it. Well, here we are all back together. Now unfortunately with these multi-plate clutches you always get a little bit of drag. However, it's not dragging so bad that that won't stop if I fall into it anymore. Before it used to be basically in gear at all times. But, you know, if I want to, I can stop this, it won't kill me. Hopefully with this we have fixed 2 OH&S problems and one other problem. It used to leak oil quite badly here, which meant you got oil all over your step, and it became very slippery when you were climbing on and off the back of the tractor. The second one is, although it's still dragging a little bit, even with it out of gear, if you got off the tractor with it running and fell into the PTO shaft, it would have ripped you to shreds. Now it won't. But also, if we climb up into the tractor and put it into gear, it grips and doesn't slip anymore. Pull the lever up, starts running faster. And back out of gear again. Well, hopefully some of you have found this useful. This turned out to be a bigger job than I was expecting it to be. It took me a bit longer than I was hoping. But we've got it all back together now. Really important job. These are worn out on most of these old Chamberlains. So I hope it's been useful to a few of you. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.